Hi you guys, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel, and today's video is going to be my August wrap up. And I've been hitting, if you guys watched my TBR for September, you know that I have been hitting a weird reading slump recently. So I only read a total of 5 books this month, which, you know, might not sound like I have hit a reading slump, but given the fact that I have been kind of blasting through books recently and to kind of start trudging through them, feels like I'm hitting a little bit of a reading slump. So let's get into the books. The first book I read is a sequel to the series that I started last year, and that is Layer of Dreams by Libba Bray. This is the second book to the Diviners Quartet, I believe. And essentially, it picks up a couple of weeks after the events of the Diviners, where we see that there are more Diviners that are currently joining the ranks, and we're also seeing more development with the characters and all this weird organization stuff that's kind of happening on. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really like this book. I enjoyed it so much, but it does suffer from a bit of second book syndrome, which I feel if you're going to write anything paranormal or mystery or thriller that's going to be like a series, these tend to happen. Like, getting second book syndrome does tend to happen. It was really slow in the beginning, and everything felt so disjointed that I struggled to see how everything was going to come together, and I found, like, come together in the end, and I found myself kind of glazing over certain point of views. Evie's being one of them, which kind of broke my heart because I really love Evie, but it's fine. But also loving others. But by the time we reached, I think, like the second part of this book, it picked up really fast and I started to really enjoy what was going on. I think that all the characters are super fleshed out, and I love the amount of diversity in here. We have a black character, we have a biracial romance, we have a gay character in here, we have a biracial child in here with a physical disability. We have, what else? Someone in here, oh yeah, and then we have a character that's currently kind of suffering from the after effects of a abusive relationship. So it was a really lovely read. It picked up speed once I got into it, so I would highly recommend the series if you guys have not tried it already. I'm going to be picking up the third book soon, and I'm pretty sure that we will not be getting another change of cover, because I'm pretty sure I'll throw the cover up here, or whatever it is, the cover for the last book, and it looks pretty similar to the style of these books, so I am not complaining. But that just means I have to wait for the paperback, because everything else I have is in paperback, which is fine. The next book I read is actually a reread, and that is A Fire and Stars by Audrey Coulthurst. This is a young adult high fantasy novel involving 2 princesses. One is Denna, who has been betrothed to the king of Mineria for quite some time now, and when she goes over there to make things, you know, official and like marry the guy, she ends up falling in love with the princess in the midst of like an assassination attempt, a possible invasion, just a lot of stuff that is going on that, you know, probably shouldn't be going on in this situation. I reread this because of Ice and Shadows came out shortly after, or like in last month, so I wanted to reread this before I picked up the second book and, you know, fell in love with it. I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. I believe this is 3 out of 5 stars. I believe this is the same rating I gave it when I first read the book, but I will have my original review down below as well as the updated one on Goodreads. I like this book. I really enjoyed Denna and Mare's relationship. I feel like there's a very solid foundation of trust in here. I was just kind of really confused on the world building at times. I couldn't understand the magic system. At the same time, I know this is kind of like really nitpicky, but I couldn't tell how the views were when it came to same-sex relationships. I believe in the beginning Mare runs past 2 boys kissing and she doesn't think much of it, but then when Denna hears that her lady-in-waiting is actually a lesbian and has a female lover, she sounds like as if it's the first time she's heard of this concept. So I would have really liked that to have cleared up. On top of that, I felt like there were instances where the language got a little too flowery for my liking, and it took me out of the reading. Like she was trying really hard to like make it sound romantic and poetic, and by the end of it I was like, why is this necessary? But I still enjoyed it. I think that Denna and Mare's relationship is so gorgeous, and I just wanted to see so much more of it in this book. So, as you can tell, I'm very happy that there's a sequel. The next book I read was actually an ebook of the graphic novel Monsters by Marjorie Liu, and I forgot who actually wrote designed it, so I will throw their name up on the screen. This follows a weird steampunk horror Asian style of situation where our main character Mariko is a half-wolf kind of girl who has been thrown into this world, and she's only been thrown into this world to try to find out what happened to her mom and get revenge on the people who had caused her death, while also figuring out this weird voice in her head that happens when she comes near a mask. So it's a toss-up for kind of the plot summary, really. I gave this graphic novel a 5 out of 5 stars. I know there's a series, so I can't wait to pick up the second one. I found the art style absolutely gorgeous. I thought that even with all the blood and the gore and all the little itty bitties coming out of bodies, it was still aesthetically pleasing, which is really weird to say, but it makes sense when you've read this graphic novel. I loved the characters and the plot. I felt that the plot was so complex, and we definitely have more room for that to be developed and worked on and kind of transformed as it goes along. As even like right now with the first volume, nothing seems to be really all that cut and dry. The characters, like I said, were wonderfully diverse and complex. Even from the villain's standpoint, we saw quite a bit of, we saw a lot of them, if that makes sense. A lot of their like values and their morals and what they're doing. So it was like, we know that they're a villain and they're really shitty people, but we still got that complexity to know that they're like, hey, we're really shitty, but we have a reason. Sort of, not really. The only thing that I had a problem with was that I couldn't really get a really good read on the main character, Mariko. I felt like she was really stoic at times, but while I don't mind a good stoic character, she was just too closed off, and I couldn't really get into her head, which is weird because most of the graphic novel was in her head. But, you know, I highly recommend this first volume, and I'll be picking up the second one and the following installments when I get the chance. The next book that I read is Of Ice and Shadows by Audrey Coulthurst. This is the sequel to Of Fire and Stars, if you could not tell. And this, like I said, is a YA high fantasy, and this time we follow Denna and Mare as they make their way through Zamorta after the events of Fire and Stars, so we can train we can train Denna's magic, as well as find out what's really going on in this mystical, magical land of Zamorta. I have a full stop review for this. I will leave that linked down below with the rest of the reviews, but I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. 3.5 actually, yeah, 3.5 out of 5 stars. While I enjoyed it, I felt like there were definitely aspects I could have worked on. I like that Audrey gave us kind of a chance to explore more of her world building, but it still felt very lacking. I still wanted to see more and develop more, and I feel like if we had gotten more page time, especially for a sequel, like her first 2 books have done pretty well, like she has another book with a co-author, so I think like she's a pretty, not like super established, but she's established enough to where she should have gotten more page time for this. But I enjoyed it. I think Denna and Mare's relationship is just built on so much trust and love, and I just love all the characters that she creates. Although I'm always really upset when she kills off the male characters. Not because I'm like, oh my god, we need more male characters in this book, but because it's like they have so much room to grow and develop into more than just like what we have seen so far, and then they die. And then I'm just sitting here like, that's great and all, but I wanted to know who his kid was. So I guess I'll never find out, but highly recommend this series, and I can't wait for the next installment whenever that comes out. And finally, the last book that I read is Karva by Stephanie Garber. This is a sequel to Legendary. I flipped that around. The final book that I read is Karva. The final book that I read is Karva. It's not Caraval, it's Legendary. The final book that I read is Legendary by Stephanie Garber. This is the sequel to Caraval, and it follows the events directly after. Only this time we see it from Tella's perspective, as she is kind of figuring out who this mysterious friend of hers is, what she feels about Dante, and what happened to her mother, really, in this world. I gave this, I believe, I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I think that it's a solid second book. It does suffer from second book syndrome, but given how like high the stakes are, you need to set up a lot for this. So that's the only reason, but it's not like a huge overarching, like I would not pick this up again. My biggest issues, aside from it being slow, is that I felt like we should have gotten a dual perspective in this novel, because by the end of it, I really found myself hating Scarlet, and I love Scarlet to bits. And I also found it really hard to enjoy Tella's perspective, because by the end of Caraval, I was not her biggest fan. So to have like her sole perspective be the only perspective in this book was really kind of jarring for me, and I would have liked to have seen a dual perspective, which I believe the third book has a dual perspective. But I enjoyed it so much. I love the love interest. Like, can we like raise the roof for like Jax, even though Jax is a terrible human being, and Dante, whose like betrayal has hurt me to my core. I just really also miss Julian. Like Julian, I missed him so much. I didn't see him a lot in this book, and I'm having separation anxiety. But other than that, I loved the romances in here. I loved the world building. I loved every single part of this book. And I really can't wait to see what else happens. But I have to wait for the paperback or else it won't match. This is a problem. This is a really bad problem. Because I love me a good paperback. They're just easier to carry around. But like, everything comes out in hardcover first. And then I have to wait like a year. And by the time I read the book, everyone's like, oh yeah, why haven't you read that yet? I already reread it like 10 times over. And it's just, it's time. But that is it for my wrap up. Again, not the most fruitful month, but I mean like, I read some pretty good books, so I can't be too upset. So if you guys haven't seen my reviews for these books or haven't read them, I will leave them all linked down below with all my socials. If you guys have any suggestions for books you want me to read in the future, I will have, my TBR for September is up, so that's not moving anytime soon. But my TBR for like the rest of the months are pretty open, so if you have any suggestions, leave me a comment. But until then, hit like, subscribe, and I will talk to you guys everywhere else. Bye!